Let me welcome everyone again. We are now into almost 9 weeks of shelter in place here at the Shaner household. And I was telling people before the call, I've been having fun kind of doing the half thing with my beard that I let grow to commemorate the shelter in place. But then the neck got way too scratchy, and then took it down further and took it down further. And I thought, well, I'll just leave it on for today and see how it goes. Anyway, we're having fun. I love how spontaneous these conversations have developed. And I think it's important for maybe people who drop in for the first time. Let me just do a bit of a cab ride to say how we got here, and specifically how we got to this topic that we're now going to occupy ourselves with for the next month, actually, because it's such a huge topic. So let me start like this. When we first got together, it was a community call just to see how we're doing. And I had prepared, as you recall, a bit of lesson plan. And I thought to myself, you know, at a time like this, let's go back to the basics of the basics of the basic. And as we all know, I went back to Key in Daily Life, the second half, the application of a life with Key. And we took the first 3 chapters that Toi Sensei always taught as a unit. And by the way, even this stems from Saikontan. So there's going to be layers and layers and layers of this. So I'm going to ask you to be patient with me, because it's going to take, you know, at least 4 classes. Maybe it'll be 6. Maybe I'll surprise myself and do it in 3. But it's spontaneous. So I'm really interested in this project. So how did we get here? Once we got to the subconscious mind, I remember David Bosco asked, you know, when Toi Sensei writes in that chapter, there's all these different kinds of minds, strong minds, weak minds, strong suggestions, weak suggestions. And I had mentioned this idea of Nen no Chikara, right? The power of a now mind. And that got us into the 3 orders of body-mind awareness. So we had a number of classes covering that. And specifically, Terry Sensei stepped up and said, you know what, these 3 orders that I've been familiar with since I was at Furman, this really makes a difference in my ability to notice the difference at home. So we heard examples from his family. And then Ileana stepped up and said, you know what, these 3 orders can also be helpful to understand the process that I have been going through as a pianist, specifically playing live. Then Freiling Sensei stepped up and said, oh yeah, well, guess what? I noticed the difference in daily life with my family and my extended family. And what is serving me well is my training as an otomo. And when I introduced him, I found myself explaining a story. I can't tell you how many people have written to me. So this is how spontaneous it is. But I shared the story that in the fall of 1976, I had a unique interaction with Tohei Sensei. Specifically to take you back, I had just moved to Honolulu. Toi Sensei knew me as a ski racer and someone that took his uke up and down the West Coast. And so we didn't have that much of a relationship. In fact, at the beginning, he couldn't remember my name and he kept saying the curly-headed boy from Idaho. Then when he figured out my name, it was Dabido from then on. So there I was at the Palama Dojo training. Toi Sensei was there in Honolulu. And as I said last week, he asked if I would drive him to the Pagoda Hotel. And during that, he said, so what's up? And I linked that to Toi Sensei kind of living in first order body-mind awareness. And then an event comes in, it was me out of place, and he was curious. So as the story went, he asked me what I was doing. I said, I'm attending the University of Hawaii in Tetsugaku, that's Japanese for philosophy, or Bukkyo Gaku, studying Buddhism. And he realized, because I told him the reason why I was there is because I wanted to train more deeply, that what he was teaching was now what I was really interested in, that I understood that it worked in ski racing. And I was just interested in performance development. So to my amazement, and I didn't understand it at the time, but now I can reflect back, he really was taken by that because his philosophical interests were very strong in the same areas that I was studying in graduate school. So I don't want to get ahead of myself because there are multiple layers here, but that's just how we got here. So many people wrote in and said, whoa, I want to hear more about this, that interaction, because that interaction characterized our relationship. Remember, I said I was studying at the time Chan Buddhism with Jung Zhang, super famous scholar, early Buddhism, causation, particularly Praticcasamuppada with David Kalupahana. He knew this, and because he'd been training in Hawaii for so long, since 1953, he knew very well the super reputation of the East-West Center and the Comparative Philosophy Department at the University of Hawaii. It was essentially second to none, but I should be proud of my alma mater, but it's true. So Toi Sensei was really taken by that. And what you're going to find out as I peel this back is my own interests in personal development and philosophy mirrored his, unbeknownst to me. So it's certainly, I didn't deserve any credit. It was just a happenstance thing that we had this interest in common. And he specifically introduced, when I said I'm studying, oh yeah, Confucianism, Buddhism, Taoism, and he went straight to Saikontan the first time I heard that text's name. So, well, let me just start. Saikontan is translated usually as discourses on vegetable roots. To find pleasure and gratitude for the most simple truths. To find joy in the most bitter root. Is to be one who is both positive and grateful. That's a one-sentence kind of summary, but I'm going to enjoy peeling this back, and I want to say it's a personal journey for me, so let me do a disclaimer here. Everything that I'm going to tell you is talking very, very openly about my relationship with Tohei Sensei and what he taught and what characterized our relationship. But my relationship, while it's different from other people because of our shared interest, a real lesson here is that Toi Sensei took great interest in not just training his students, but in their careers. And so Toi Sensei, you'll find out, took a tremendous interest in my career as a professional philosopher, as an academic, as an author. And Saikontan was the glue through all of this. But I also know he's had other super long time senior students. I'll say because he refers to it, or I would ask about it because when I first started Aikido, Tabata Sensei had just started the teaching the Oregon Key Society. And Tabata Sensei, as you know, is a super long time student of Toi Sensei, to put it mildly, because his father was a student of Toi Sensei. So I know for a fact that Toi Sensei also followed his career as a banker, and that Toi Sensei took great delight when he would find out that Tabata Sensei was promoted here or there. You know, Toi Sensei would tell me about it like a proud father, because Toi Sensei was always concerned with ki in daily life, which I'm going to make more apparent as we go. Okay, the overview of, say, 4 classes that I tried to put together. Today, I'm going to try to give you, I see my friends Sophia and Crystal and Olaf. My philosophical German word is Weltanschauung. So I'm going to share with you Toi Sensei's worldview, his Weltanschauung. If you read Hegel and Kant, you get to say these words a lot. Anyway, I want to set the stage today for the other 3 sessions, and just say, look, these are just my personal reflections. You can throw it all out. It's not going to make your training any better. but it might be, if you're curious about understanding Toi Sensei, our founder, and the seeds of his thinking, if that's interesting to you, then you will be interested. But by no means what I'm going to share with you is going to be, you know, some new technique or curriculum. So please just let me speak freely as an individual student of Tohei Sensei. As I mentioned, that fall interaction started something that throughout my graduate school career at the University of Hawaii, when Toi Sensei would come, I was regularly otomoing for him and taking Huzuke in the late 1970s. And I think what Tohei Sensei saw in me was potentially someone like himself at a particular stage in his life where he, I'll say that it now for the first time, but the people who I know who have trained with Toi Sensei a lot, he'd say this all the time when he'd start, especially key class. You have to be able to do it, not just say it. And this phrase that he would say all the time, what he means is when you're going to teach key class, you have to be able to demonstrate and show people one-on-one exactly the difference between unifying your mind and body and not. You can't just get up there and talk about it and pretend you're the sensei if you can't do it. So he was serious about, you can't just say it, do it. I'll set a context here. What he means by say it in this context of my story, Saikontan, is it's one thing to have book knowledge. It's one thing to read. Like Toi Sensei did in fact memorize Saikontan. He could say it. He could say it anytime. He could pull out epigrams anytime he wanted that would make a real pithy point. But just book knowledge means absolutely nothing. You have to train. You have to be able to do it. So what I'm doing is sharing with you more the book knowledge to get inside Toi Sensei's head, but I am under no illusion this is not a replacement for training in any way. What I will do, however, is as we go on in the coming weeks, is I will share how deeply the lessons of Saikontan have virtually infiltrated the vocabulary of much, maybe even the majority of what we do. So I'm going out on a limb. I'm making a pretty powerful claim here. And I'll say it again. There is no other text, there is no other book that, by a long shot, that affected Toi Sensei's thinking, both in his personal life, his professional life, and when the way he understands his Tenshoku. That means your life mission. So let me just do a sound check. Rich, are we good?
Yes, 100%.
Okay. So let me put on my academic hat here just for a second and do the things that any academic has to do. So let me just do a couple of items. First of all, Saikontan is the Japanese pronunciation. In Chinese, Saikendan, different romanization. It was written by an author, we think, whose name was Hung Tzu-cheng, but he is also known as Hung Young-ming. We know nothing about his life, birth dates, death dates. We do know from one single record that he was alive in 1596. That would be the late Ming Dynasty. The Ming Dynasty was a time when there was great stability and uniformity in China. And when that tends to happen worldwide, you get an increase in intellectual activity and a greater emphasis on education when you have a stable government. So the author was what's referred to as a syncretic thinker. Saikontan is a combination of Confucianism, Taoism, and Buddhism, specifically Chan Buddhism. So let me say a few words about the title again, just to introduce this. Discourses on vegetable roots. Only those that can appreciate the least palatable of vegetable roots know the meaning of life. This book is about simple, homely symbols of spiritual truths as they come to an extremely unpretentious man, a humble man, the author. Abstract ideas, abstract philosophical ideas, are illustrated by concrete images and images that are so clear that one translator wrote, "To understand this text, all one needs are the eyes to see and ears to hear." You just reflect on these epigrams. Hung Yongming also had predecessors, because we know in the text, the notion of vegetable roots actually comes from Jushi. Jushi was a much earlier philosopher, but for those who pay attention, probably in this order are the greatest philosophical influences on Chinese culture. Confucius, his student Mencius, then Lao Tzu, the founder of Taoism, and Zhuangzi, a follower of Lao Tzu. And then number 5 would be Jushi. Jushi was the first to really create the syncretism, combining the elements of Buddhism, Taoism, and Confucianism, Taoism, and Buddhism. That this was syncretic, that is pulling together pieces without being accepted because it's a doctrine or because it's a certain ism. This really appealed to Tohei Sensei because he wanted things to be clear and friendly and easy for anyone to digest. So he was not willing to promote isms, but he was after universal truths. So Jushi said, if one is able to chew vegetable greens and roots well, then they should be able to do all things. Now think about the shokushu. How many times does Tohei Sensei say something and then he'll say, those who understand this can accomplish an important task. Those who understand this can meet an enemy of 10,000 men. Those who understand this will realize that their minds and bodies are originally unified. Those that understand this will experience that they are truly one with the universe. These kinds of thinking, as is written in the Shokushu, is mapped out in Saikontan. So it's not a secret. It's just that unless you really probe and dig into this stuff, as I would do, and as Tohei Sensei was fond of talking about, I would never do this in front of other people because it was just personal conversation. But when I would otomo for him, we had lots of opportunity to do this. And when I was in Uchideshi, I got to otomo more than most because every time I would go out to see a famous scholar or the abbot of a tradition or some senior priest at some temple, Tohei Sensei wanted to know all about it. And you'll understand this because I'm going to lay bare the story in pretty much detail. So what about this? Chewing on things. If we do not chew things well, that is, if we do not ruminate, contemplate, if we do not work at things over time, including training your subconscious mind, which I have reintroduced, you will never know the true tastes of things, and you will never have a true understanding of them. So this idea of going from say it to do it requires a lot of work, a lot of training, and it's described in the heroes of Saikontan. So permit me to continue. The other main theme of Saikontan is simplicity. If we are truly to live, it is the simple things in life that will give us life's true savor. Once you open the philosophical can of worms of making it okay to be a syncretic thinker, to pull from different traditions and then make something your own, it's only a short step to the notion that sagehood, or what is referred to as a junsu, training to be a shensu, which I'll explain later, that all people potentially can achieve this sagehood. It was no longer an unattainable ideal belonging only to a few great men of the past. For if sagehood was now understood to be the formation of one body with heaven and earth and all things, it is certainly not very far for anyone in this present moment to begin their life's path. For Tohei Sensei, this became an ideal for all of humanity. That if all of humanity could get this, that would make him very happy, because everyone has a potential that is untapped. Let's dig further. Tohei Sensei, he would never say this, but I think he carried himself what in Japanese is called a bunjin. Bunjin is like a man of literature, a highly educated person, intelligentsia. And Tohei Sensei's frequent reference to the classics kind of put him in that category rather obviously. What is a bunjin? The character bun in Chinese is wen, and it means, usually is translated as pattern, but it has a long history. So we're talking about a pattern person. Let me explain what that is, because this is how Tohei Sensei identified himself. Wen, by the way, the Chinese character also indicates literature. That is, there are patterns in literature that educated people can follow. And this first appeared really early in the Shang Dynasty, like on bronze, on pieces of bronze. And it was referring to the patterns of nature and civilization and writing itself. So for Confucius, these patterns refer to the notion of li, or ritual propriety. These are codified relationships, like father-son, husband-wife, emperor-subject. All these relationships had li. And Confucius believed that when everyone in society performs their li according to their vocation or their place or their position in the family, then this will create what was referred to as the Tianming, heaven on earth. The will of heaven will be made when love and benevolence, Ran, one of the Confucian values, would be embodied here on earth. So for Confucius, these patterns had to do with social relationships. But Wen also had a meaning of patterns for Taoists. And if you know anything about Taoism, you could put this together. The pattern of a Taoist is to imitate nature, to understand the flow of the whole of the universe, the Tao, and to modify your behavior so that you are acting in accord with the Tao, not moving against it. So in this case, happiness, health will be a kind of pattern when you are moving in harmony with the universe. Clearly, something close to Tohei Sensei. So we understand waves and ripples on bodies of water, the blooming and falling of flowers, the sounds of the wind, the flights of birds. Each is a manifestation of universal principles or patterns for our contemplation. First, we have to notice. First, we have to see calmly. And then we need to chew and ruminate and make it our own. Humans have patterns too, which unfortunately are filtered through our mind. And that's where Buddhism comes in. The Buddhist is to cultivate a mirror-like mind, like a first order mind that doesn't have smoke and dust covering your mirror. So in combination, the Confucian notion of sagehood, the Taoist notion of sagehood, and the Buddhist notion of an enlightened bodhisattva, in combination, Toi Sensei saw, as did the author of Saikontan, that we are truly free to create patterns in our life if we change our conscious and subconscious mind to patterns that reflect internally the patterns of nature. This is a kind of becoming one with the universe with respect to Saikontan. Okay, I'm gonna pause here, and I'm gonna read you something in Toi Sensei's own words. You remember that Toi Sensei, I think I told you earlier, as maybe 12 young person, his father doused him with cold water. That really shook him up. I think we talked about that in one of our sessions. And kind of like getting up in the morning. He made that a regimen. And he gradually began building strength. His father was a judo instructor. He trained in judo. And then when he came of age, he was going to Keio University, and he enrolled in the Keio preparatory school. And he continued to train in judo at the judo club. Long story made short, he got slammed really badly and got pleurisy. And he had to take a year off of school. And this is Toi Sensei's words from that time. The year's absence from college, which followed, was very meaningful to me. It changed my life completely. The restless days in bed convinced me I could not spend my life like that. After 2 months, I was well enough to sit up. I began to read books regarding metaphysical training, meditation, and religion. I read the Analects of Confucius and Mencius, 2 ancient Chinese books, and the biographies of the great men of the world. I was particularly taken by Saikontan, another ancient Chinese masterpiece, and read it so often, I nearly had it memorized. I gradually decided I want to enter training myself. By the way, it was very shortly thereafter that his sister brought him the book that she thought he might be interested in, that she found it in this bookstore, called Watashi no Sensei by Ogura Sensei, who was one of the last remaining students of Yamo Kateshu. And it was from that introduction that Toi Sensei began studying Zen and Ichikukai. But think of it now, this is the personal part. When Toi Sensei read this book again and again and again, even committing it to memory, he could say it, and he would say he felt like a hero, like he was a superhero reading. Remember, he's sick and he's in bed, but when he read this text, he felt that he would come alive. But as soon as he put the book down and he faced like reality, he was still sick in bed. So he was only in his mind was he living like this super sage. And so that decision to commit to training and development so that he could do it, not just say it, that was a connection he saw there when I was saying, hey, I'm going to the University of Hawaii. I'm going to learn all about how to say it. And Toi Sensei knew from my perseverance that I really wanted to understand him and training. So he took that as like, wow, this guy wants to learn not just the ideas, but he wants to do it. I didn't understand at the time why that made such a connection to him. But I think he saw in myself probably like, oh my God, I got to help this kid because that university is going to fill him up with all kinds of ideas that might be crazy, and it's going to be hard for me to really teach him. Fortunately, the reason why I was going to the University of Hawaii is because I was trying to understand this whole idea that you're stronger relaxed. I found that just amazing. So Toi Sensei just didn't want to learn how to do it himself. He knew that he believed in these universal principles. These principles that he read in Saikontan, he believed squared perfectly with his direct experience of the world. And the more he started to train, the more he thought, wow, this Saikontan is even more powerful than I thought. So on the subject of training, I'm going to have to introduce maybe just one passage from the Confucian Analects. One of the most famous ones is passage 2.4. This is Confucius, and I want to read this in the context of the difference between keiko and shugyo, or the notion of a tenshoku. By the way, 10 of tenshoku is the character for heaven. So it goes back to the Confucian tradition of the mandate of heaven. What does heaven have in mind for you? So 2.4 goes like this. At 15, I set my heart on learning. That's referred to as a junsu. You have to commit to be a student. It's usually translated as, and they always use the male, but a gentleman. So at 15, he became a gentleman. He's going to seriously study. At 30, I took my stand. At 40, I became free from doubts. At 50, I understood the decree of heaven, the Tianming. At 60, my ear was attuned, expanded periphery. At 70, I followed my heart's content without overstepping the line. The line is li, ritual propriety. But if you follow your heart's content and you never have to put yourself in check, that means you've become a sage. That means that you have internalized, even at the subconscious level, the understanding of how to live in accordance with the will of heaven, or with the Tao, or to reflect all things clearly in the Buddhist tradition. Toi Sensei, I told you before, committed to his father that he would finish school at Keio University. He majored in economics. It's no secret he was not interested in economics, didn't do well in school. Why? Because while he was at Keio, he's studying Zen. He's studying Misogi, Sokshin no Gyo. And he's contemplating in his mind a career in something to do with personal development or spiritual development. He doesn't know what it is yet. But he's thinking, if I could actually discover a means for anyone at any time in any place to understand how to develop themselves to become this kind of heroic sage, that's what I want to do. But how? He finishes college. You've probably read about his experiences in the military and his continued training with Ogura Sensei, Ueshiba Sensei, and Tempu Nakamura Sensei. Toi Sensei's genius, in my opinion, is he did just that. That's the treasure. That's the treasure that we have. I mean, to me, it's like I've dedicated my whole life to putting these principles to the test. And I can say now, approaching my 66th birthday, it works every time. Toi Sensei is a genius. He's a genius. He did it. And all these tools he's already given to us. But what I'm going to do is lay it out in further detail. In April of 1943, he entered an 8 months officers preparatory academy at the military. And they were not allowed to have any books, only what you could carry. So he was given one diary. And because he liked Saikontan so much, he wrote in his diary, and he wrote passages from Saikontan. Well, this military training academy was supposed to be really, really strenuous. And Toi Sensei didn't think so at all, because he had done other kinds of training, specifically at Ichikukai and Zen, that was way more difficult than this physical training that these officer candidates were exposed to. Well, one time the senior officers, the senior military, they all went in there and they confiscated everyone's diary. And just about everyone was complaining about how hard it was and woe is me and how negative it was. You know, you can talk about the ethics of taking someone's diary, but that's what happened. But one person's diary stood out, and it was Toi Sensei, because he was actually saying, this is a lot easier than I thought. And he's writing all these high-level bunjin sort of epigrams from an ancient classic Chinese text. And they're like, whoa, who is this guy? And lots of different experiences like that, where Toi Sensei was just clearly in another realm compared to others. So while he's in the military, the concept of Fudoshin, an immovable mind, is in Saikontan as well. And Toi Sensei says that he experienced Fudoshin for the first time while he was serving in the military in China. And what he recognized is that an immovable mind also meant Fudo-tai, an immovable body. And this was the very beginning, the seeds of him developing the 4 basic principles. That an immovable mind that is part of Saikontan, he experienced for the first time in the military in China. And he recognized, you know what, when my mind is immovable, so is my body. Let me think about that. So Toi Sensei pieced it all together, but he pieced it all together because he was solving for a particular problem. How do you become like the ideal hero in his mind that's part Confucian sage, part Taoist priest, and part enlightened Buddhist that sees the world very clearly, all in one? In Saikontan, it says, the superior person takes things as they come. And when things pass, his mind is once again clear, just like the one that I read last week for you when Rich was doing his thing. Wind through the bamboo, it's not held. Reflection of the geese over a frozen lake, not held. This is a repetitive theme. I'm going to do this in later sessions, but I just want to note, in 1988, for reasons I'll explain later, we did 25 hours of recorded interviews with Toi Sensei in preparation for a book to be about his life. And from those recordings, you could say that Toi Sensei's lifelong effort has been to distill that which is true for everyone, that which works anywhere and anytime, and that which can be called universal. And as you've heard me say before, Toi Sensei's definition of universal is when everybody says yes and nobody says no. But beyond that, Toi Sensei wanted something that he could apply and teach others in daily life 24/7. And when he stumbled on the right approach over time, as judged by his own ability to complete a task or achieve a desired result, very simple, very pragmatic, not seeking enlightenment, just trying to be the best he could be. He recognized that in these situations, he was always centered, relaxed, calm, and positive. And from that, we get the 4 basic principles. Last point. During those years before I became a Uchideshi, 76, 77, 78, when I'm attending graduate school, and Toi Sensei's coming to Hawaii, and I'm now otomoing and ukeng and being with him all the time and sharing this philosophical journey, he knew that my plan was to write my PhD dissertation on Tohei Sensei himself, on Saikontan, and on the relationship between the mind and body. But there was one problem, or one challenge. The University of Hawaii, being a very traditional school, was not going to be an easy task for me to actually get my dissertation approved to write it on this living, thinking martial artist called Koichi Tohei. So I had a plan. I was going to introduce my dissertation chairman, Thomas Patrick Kasulis, to Toi Sensei, which I did. And this was important because this is how Toi Sensei could serve my needs. Okay, I'm supposed to be the otomo for him. What I said last week, he's really being the otomo for the otomo. You don't see it, but his mind is that clear and polished. So I shared all this with him over these years, and Nonaka Sensei, who was the president of the Hawaii Ki Society, was instrumental in kind of paving the way for me to go become an Uchideshi. But Toi Sensei was already well aware of my role at the university, and the idea was to get dissertation research credit by me living as an Uchideshi with Toi Sensei. Well, that required a lot of arms and legs moving together. So Toi Sensei knew, because I introduced him to my chairman, that the university said no, but we recognize Toi Sensei is a true master, so we will approve you learning with him directly, understanding the relationship between the mind and body, but you're going to have to write your dissertation on, classical seminal figures in Japanese Buddhist philosophy. And that ended up being Dogen Kigen, the founder of the Soto Shu, and Kobodaishi Kukai, the founder of the Shingon Shu. Really difficult texts. The good news is Toi Sensei knew all this. So by the time I'm living with him as a Uchideshi, he knows I have to write on Dogen and Kukai. But he helped me to develop these 3 orders of body-mind awareness, 3rd, 2nd, and 1st, as we've talked about, because it's so simple to use them as a guidepost to Saikontan. Way simpler than Dogen's texts and Kukai's texts. So, the one original thing about my doctoral thesis was Toi Sensei and Saikontan, him helping me to figure out these 3 orders of body-mind awareness. Okay, I've taken too much time, but I want to end reading one more thing from Toi Sensei. And thank you for your patience while I've just tried to lay this out as cab ride-like as it might be. Here's Toi Sensei's own words. Technology today touches nearly every part of our lives. Through ever more impressive development of machines, the process continues. Computers put men out of work. The process continues. Pushing a single button is enough to start a nuclear war. Gradually, though, the world has begun to remember that it is humanity for whom the machines must work, not the other way around. We recognize now that science, for all its achievements, have done little to help us understand ourselves and to realize our potential. There is no sense in waiting for science to do it for us. Each of us must now take it upon themselves to understand their true nature and strength. The Chinese classic Saikontan says that we stand like beggars at the gate, forgetting the infinite power given to us by the universe. Of course, great men through the ages have not ignored the infinite power offered to them. Persons such as the Buddha and many other famous people have been able to unify their minds and bodies to realize their true nature and strength. But the average person sees people like this as part of a different world. They think that they have been touched by a magic wand and fail to recognize that the power of a Buddha, a Christian saint, or even a political and business leader is available to all of us. Instead of shrinking from this potential, we should be thankful and grateful for it. We should strive to manifest itself and help others do the same. Here's the key. I regard my 4 basic principles to unify mind and body as having been given to me by the universe to spread the way of the universe. There have been many who have grasped unification of mind and body. Very few, however, could teach it. Fewer still could teach how to teach it. Those who learn the 4 basic principles have come to understand not only how to unify their minds and bodies, but also to teach it to others. I ask each person who learns this to pass his or her knowledge on to others. And so the chain of understanding will remain unbroken. This is our responsibility to future generations. And this is what my teachers have always told me, starting as a young pup. Oh, by the way, I'm investing in you for future generations. Now I understand what they were saying, and I feel the weight of this responsibility to teach as clearly and carefully as possible. That's what I had prepared for today, to just set the stage of the groundwork of the importance of this text. And so I realize that I've already taken 50 minutes. Apologies. I had a lot to say and a lot of notes that I was pulling from. So I guess we have time for a question or two. And I would encourage you to continue to write to me, because each week I'm actually having a ball preparing all this stuff. But I have, I'm going to follow this chronologically. So in future sessions, I'm going to pick up where I left off, having finished my dissertation, and then what happened after that. Because Toi Sensei's Tenshoku, to help in the field of personal development, just happened to be what I chose to do, philosophy and personal development. And that's why he took such a keen interest in me, not because I earned it or there was any merit. I lucked into it, and I am forever grateful. And just curious if you have any questions.
Thank you, Sensei. There's a couple questions if there's time. I'm going to just go first come, first serve. Matthew, you had a question.
Sure. So hopefully this doesn't... Hi, Sensei. Hopefully this doesn't take us
Good morning.
A little... Oh, yeah, good morning. Yeah. Hopefully this doesn't take us off the path, but you've just been talking a lot about you must be able to do it, not just say it, and the importance of teaching. And still there's an extent to there's a certain amount that you have to know. But I couldn't help but think of what I had been hearing earlier this year from Kaicho Sensei and Ohara Sensei about seishitsu, one's nature and their kind of like personality, and noryoku, and saying that seishitsu is more important, someone's disposition, more than the actual ability to do something.
Yeah.
So I was curious as to where the line is, in your opinion.
There's no line. It's true. That idea actually goes back to, believe it or not, Indian philosophy. They called them gunas. That is, we all have different psychological and physiological preponderances. In other words, tendencies, personality types. And so part of that is getting to know yourself, so you understand what are your strengths, what are your weaknesses, and what are your interests. Because if you're going to throw yourself into something to be the very best you can be at it, there's got to be a kind of passion there and an interest. So it's not just learning the teachings and then being able to do it, but the journey is about understanding yourself too, so that over time, your tenshoku, your life's mission, becomes laid bare gradually. So for example, at one time in your life, you thought, like, I don't know who your swimming hero was back then, but you wanted to be like an Olympic swimmer. And you were already like having national records and competing nationally, and you were in high school. But then something changed in your life, like Taoism, like, you know, the world shifted. And you had to now redefine who you were as a person, because your self-identity was completely wrapped up in being a swimmer. And in fact, one of the reasons you started Aikido was to fill that void. So it's not something that you just figure out over a weekend, but it's something that if you put in front of yourself, gradually over time, you know, you've got one life. This may not be a rehearsal. So it's worth time to chew on it, ruminate it. See if you can understand how sweet a bitter root might be with enough chewing and rumination.
Thank you, Sensei.
You're welcome.
Sensei, we have another question from Christelle. Christelle, if you could unmute and ask that.
Oh, Crystal, how are you? V Gates. Oh, your mic is off. There you go. V Gates. V Gates.
Genau. I'm fine, Sensei. I just put my headset on, so I'm more clear.
Okay,
my question is, what do you think is following the patterns of nature during this crisis?
you know you can't defend yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody can. Tamura Sensei told me that once, and I went, this is a long time ago. But Sensei, you're like seventh dawn. What do you mean you can't defend yourself? And he'd say, well, you know, when I fly to your place in South Carolina, my plane might go down. I can't control that. Or I might get hit by a disease for which there is no cure. He would say those things. And so I think rather than battling what's happening, it's important for us to stay informed, be safe, take precautions, but recognize the universe, in fact, is in flux. And, you know, maybe there's a lot to all the social disruption that's happening around the world. I don't know. I'm not a prophet. I can't predict. But clearly the effects of this are going to test all of this for many years to come. I think we have to just apply our training. You know, it's going to sound silly here, but the genius of Toi Sensei's how is to practice the principles in daily life. Are you keeping one point? Are you remaining calm? Is your weight on the underside? This is just noticing the difference of your state. Because for you to change a habit, your mind has to change first. And then you have to have the patience and the discipline to continue to train your mind again and again and again. And that's where the subconscious training comes in. So what we're learning to do is a certain amount of acceptance, patience, discipline, and realize that if we have not faith in our training principles, we have empirical evidence that when we apply the principles, we're better for it. So I would just say we just keep training. We keep our eyes open. We notice. We try to help others, serve others, and do our best and contribute to this time when everyone around the world is going through a major shift, and we don't know what's around the next corner. So I just go back to the basic principles. They are universal principles. I think they'll serve us well, and I can't say much more about it than that.
Thank you very much.
You're very welcome. I don't know that it was helpful. Just stay the course.
Sensei, that was all the questions that were listed in the chat session. So
Okay.
that might be a wrap if you have any other closing words.
No, I appreciate your patience. I went on for a long time because I knew that I was teeing up much more to come. My main goal was to help you to realize Toi Sensei's real mission in life was kind of put before him by being sick in bed and really understanding deeply the wisdom of this idea of this syncretic approach to sagehood. And because he was sick and he wanted to recover and he didn't want to live this way, he was highly, highly motivated to begin training, but he didn't know what that would mean yet. So he just threw himself into training. All of that has been documented very well, but maybe what you didn't know is that he was looking to understand a solution that is how do you do it, not just say it. So I guess I'll leave it with those words, since that's what I called this talk. And for those who have old timers who took a lot of classes from Toi Sensei, you know exactly what I mean. You have to be able to do it, not just say it. All right, everyone. Thank you for participating. I appreciate it very much. Don't be shy writing to me. It's good to see your faces and smiles. And I really appreciate it. Thank you for your time and your attention. And I treasure the training, and I hope you do too. We've been given a gift by our founder.
Thank you, Sensei.
どうもありがとうございました。